Hi there, I'm Dave, an ageing electrician amongst many things living in the north of Scotland, and I want to show you a slightly different setup for a traditional immersion heater cupboard. This is a wimpy flat, 40 odd year old, in the era of economy 7. Actually economy 8 in Scotland, because they recognise that we live in a bloody cold place. They give us an extra hour. Now typically there's no gas, so it was the hot water was heated overnight with originally a Horseman bloody changeover switch that cost about 45-50 quid. A monstrosity, to be honest. Anyway, this particular heater is not your bog standard 2 1/4 inch screw-in. Oh no, because there's a place in Glasgow, Bellshill to be exact, where they manufacture, I think to this day, flange bolt immersion heaters with a circulator in it. It's a different animal, and they cost, as we speak, £140 instead of 40 for a bog standard piece of Chinese crap. I mean, let me show you this thing, and before we delve in to replacing it. The tank itself is pretty straightforward. 140 odd litres, insulated, I say 40-year-old, nothing particularly special there. This is when it's different. It's a 4-bolt flange fitting, not a screw-in. So theoretically it's easier to remove if the plumber 40 years ago didn't put sealant on the gaskets, and we'll find it out pretty quick, because if he has, a damn thing won't come out. So that's what we're going to find out. The insulation resistance on this element is 1000 ohm. It is totally screwed, but it's 40-year-old, so give it a break. It's done a lot of service. We are going to need to drain this tank. Okay, there is a stopcock already there, if you can see it, which leads into the garden there. Okay, that leads into the garden and will drain the cylinder, because all hot water cylinders are cold water fed from the bottom, okay, with the hot water coming off the top, which means by opening a tap you can never drain the tank, because it will always be full. Makes sense? Otherwise you burn the element out. So to drain the tank you have to turn off the supply of cold water and let the tank drain through that stopcock into the garden. Very importantly, this is crucial, when you're doing that, if you don't open the hot taps, you'll get an airlock and you will think you've emptied the tank. Then you undo these bolts to release the element, and you will have a paddling pool, because the airlock stopped all that water coming out. Remember to open the taps after you have turned off the supply there, to let the water out into the garden. This is in the garden now, and it's the other end of that pipe coming off of that stopcock at the bottom of the tank, which I've connected to a hose so I can let the water drain safely. I want to run through a couple of tests you can do to check the health of your immersion heater. Now I must emphasize that you must isolate the power to the element totally at the consumer unit before you do this, or you will blow the meter and possibly yourself up. Now this one is completely disconnected because it's going to come out of here in a minute, but I'm going through the test. The first test is the one you see in front of you. It's between the neutral and live terminals of the actual element. Nothing to do with the thermostat. In fact, let's pull it out the way. We're across the element. And what you should expect with a 3 kilowatt element in the UK, between 15 and 20 ohms resistance. Let's not get into inductance, let's stick with resistance, 15 to 20 ohms. So, in theory, this heater is healthy. Right, the second test, again, with everything disconnected. Can't emphasize that enough. Now, I've had to use a cheapo meter for this one. It's an insulation test, and this element's so well gone that the bigger meter is putting up an error message like it can't possibly be true. But sadly it is, because the insulation resistance on this element is 0.001 megohms. 1,000 ohms. That is totally, utterly unacceptable. Half a megohm would be technically bad. That said, these elements do get damp if they're not used a lot. So if you had, say, half a meg on it, you might be able to get it to dry out and come back up to what is required, which is a minimum of 1 meg or 1 million ohms. Right, we're back on the job again. Now it took about 45 minutes for that tank to empty via a bog standard garden hose. So I just let it get on with it. Now I'm not going to pretend that this beast came out willingly. It didn't. The bolts came off extremely easily. I'd even say they were loose. I could almost have turned them by hand. So after hitting it with various hammers and mallets and tugging it sideways with anything that would grip it, it has come loose. So now, pretending that I'm just doing it, I'm going to pull the bloody thing out. Don't say it's not going to come out again. Come on. You cannot be serious. Here we go. Bear in mind, this thing's been in here for 40 years, right? That's a fair old time. Now it's got to come out at an angle because there's a bloody big pipe on the end of it, or tube I should call it, which is actually longer than the replacement because it goes all the way up the tank. Quite a big thing. Anyway, it's out. It's done its 40 years worth. Okay? It can be retired to the scrap merchants because it is copper, I think. Yeah, it's copper. So the next thing to do, get these old gaskets off because you don't really want to use them again. It'd be silly to do that after 40 years, wouldn't it? See, they've fallen to bits, rotten. It's actually kind of bits in my hand, literally. Fortunately, the tank looks alright. Now, next trick will be get the innards off, because that's going to be stuck probably. So that might take a bit of persuading. So I'll get back to you when I've got this slackened off a bit and we'll carry on. Okay, this was a struggle. This is what was in the inside, okay? The inner seal behind the holes. And I actually had to put a screwdriver in and hammer it to get this rotten rubber to release. Now you imagine if the plumber 40 years ago had put sealant, Boss White or whatever on there, and on the other side of it, the chances are you wouldn't get the thing out without ripping the tank. So fortunately the plumber didn't do that. It's just the rubber that went in, which is now perished, and sort of glued itself to the tank. But it's out, and I'm going to replace it with a new one. Okay, we're back again. Now we're going to fit the new one. You see there's two gaskets. One goes on the inside of the tank. The other one goes on the outside of the tank. Straightforward, but not wishing to tempt fate. I'm going to put a bit of wire on it, just for a temporary measure, in case I drop the bloody thing when I put it on the tank. Now obviously the nuts have got to come off. I was so tempted to reuse the old one, but judging by the state of the rubber on the inside of the tank, it's probably just as well I didn't, because it had turned into a gunge. So it was best replaced. So the inside one's got to come off just now, right? Sorry, the outside one. So if I can get it to come off, come on. Then there isn't a top and bottom. This one with the inside rubber. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to smear everything with silicone grease to help it along a little bit. It won't do any harm. It'll help it to slide into fit, if you know what I mean by that. And also on the actual studs. There we are. Now then, the trick is to shove it in without letting go. That's the trick. That's if it'll go in, of course. It's not awfully keen. Anyway. Now, I've got to get one of these things to fit now. How are we going to do this? So I get that top one in. We're in with a chance. Right, okay. Right, we're getting there. Very quickly put a nut on there so it doesn't drop back out again. Right, so it's not going to fall in the tank now, you know what I mean? Because I don't fancy trying to fish it out of the bottom of that thing. Tell you that for nothing. Okay, so now that I know it's not going to disappear for me, I can take this wire off. Try and take this wire off. awkward like that. It doesn't want to come off. It likes being there. Right. Okay. So we're getting there now. So obviously I've got to put this other gasket on, the outer one. Again, I'm going to put a bit of this silicone stuff on it. Let it slide a bit. This is not a sealant, it's a grease. There's a difference. This will not go rock hard. So if this thing packs up in 10 years' time after I'm probably dead, they'll be able to get it out again. Now, if I take this nut off, carefully, so I can get the gasket on. Okay. I'm going to put a nut on again for a second, just to stop it falling in. See how easy it is for it to disappear. What a pig's ear of a job, actually. But don't think 2 1/4s are any easier, because they tend to season and you can rip your tank trying to get one of them out very easily. So given the choice, this is a better idea. This is quite fiddly. Oh, it is. It is definitely fiddly. Well, I'd love to tell you that was fun, but it wasn't. I tried to get from Howden's, who make these bloody things, the torque setting for the nuts, because they're very traditional rubber gaskets, about 3mm thick, and there's obviously 2 of them, and you don't really want to over crush them. So the guy said he'd phone me back, and he did eventually phone me back and said there's so many different types of these things, even though I specified it was a 4-bolt 501, that he couldn't give me a torque figure. And just to tighten it so you don't reduce the width of the gasket by more than 1/3, i.e. 1mm. However, given that this tank is foam covered, you can't see the gaskets at all, because you can't get a side view until you've really crushed them to oblivion. So I wasn't very impressed. By the way, the electric part is a simple bit. I haven't got round to that yet. I've had enough for one day. But finally, as I was tightening the nuts up, the live cable to the thermostat attached to the post you see on the right, the element post, simply fell off. It was covered in heat shrink, so you couldn't see the devil in the detail, but it probably had never been made right in the first place, because the post, let me zoom in, the right hand post isn't damaged, so I don't think it was ever made properly in the first place. I will need to make some sort of mechanical connection to that, because it definitely won't take solder, because it won't be an alloy that will take solder, and it'll need to be a crimp-on of some sort, or God forbid a screw-on, but I've done that before. So not a very exciting day, not very impressed with Howdens, but the product itself is absolutely brilliant. The last one lasted 40 years. Well, I'll give you an update when I've done the electrics and it all looks nice and pretty. Right now, the tank is full, it's been refilled, normal pressure, and I'll be on drip alert all night long.